Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we have now entered day 38 of the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. As of today, we continue to see both Ukrainian forces and Russian forces conduct offensive operations. We continue to see the Russians making withdrawals of forces north and northeast of Kiev, while the Ukrainians continue to try to advance and retake territory as the Russians decrease its force construct just north of Kiev. At the same time, we have seen numerous continued Russian cruise missile strikes, specifically within the environments of the large oil facility, petroleum facility near Kremenchuk. Again, this is one of the largest petroleum oil facilities in Ukraine, and within the last 24 hours, it was struck with either cruise missiles and or Iskander missiles from the Russian military. We continue to see the Russian military achieve some success within the vicinity south and southeast of Kharkiv. Specifically, we have seen Russian forces advance and seize control of the town of Izium. And again, this appears to be a concerted effort by the Russians to again focus on quite possibly circumventing Ukrainian forces that are near Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and obviously the battles that continue near Severodonetsk. And we are seeing right now a multi-pronged operation by the Russians, specifically moving to the northwest out of Horlovika, and again coming south out of Izium. And those operations continue as we speak. The Russian advances continue within the confines of both areas of operation near Luhansk, Donetsk, and north of Mariupol. We continue to see Russians redeploying, again, forces that were primarily focused on operations near Chernihiv and other areas in the north of the country, quite possibly being redeployed south of Belgorod, south of Kharkiv, and again focused on seizing control of territory south of Kharkiv, north of Mariupol. We continue to see Ukrainian forces conduct counterattacks within the environments of Mykolaiv. We continue to see the Russian military hold off some of these Ukrainian counterattacks both to the southwest and northwest of Kherson. And again, these battles continue with battalion-size elements of the Ukrainian military continuing to probe and attempt movements on the city of Kherson or areas directly to the west and northwest of Kherson as well. We have started to see the Ukrainians deploy the Starstreak missile system. We anticipate that this weapon system that has been delivered by the United Kingdom to Ukrainian forces, in all likelihood, will be a fairly effective air defense asset, but we anticipate that here at MFAM, that in fact the Starstreak could in fact be more of a ground-to-ground weapon as opposed to a ground-to-air weapon. So the premise of the Starstreak is it fires off a high sonic missile that at some point releases three 2-pound what you could only define as explosive sabot rounds, like what is fired out of an armored piercing fin stabilized discarding sabot round of a main battle tank. But in the case of the Starstreak, it releases three of these tungsten steel 2-pound darts that in fact are beam riding darts that are then guided to its target by the Starstreak operator who keeps the reticle on the designated target, and then eventually those three tungsten steel darts impact with that target and thereby destroy it. It is designed to take down aircraft, but with that being said, as I talked about in previous episodes, a Starstreak engagement, say at 2,000, 3,000 meters against the side aspect of a main battle tank, meaning those three darts were to impact below the hull section just below the turret, or the hull section to the rear of the tank near the engine compartment. Now that is going to cause a quite possibly a catastrophic kill if it is able to detonate ammunition, fuel, what have you, and then obviously if it hits the engine compartment, it is going to achieve a mobility kill on that vehicle. If the Starstreak were to hit other vehicles such as BMP 1s, 2s, 3s, BTRs, or trucks, obviously it's going to do an incredible amount of damage as those three darts penetrate that vehicle, detonate, and just cause devastating injury to the personnel that are inside of those vehicles as well. So again, not just a system that is designed to bring down aircraft, but again, I believe that we will eventually see this system, the Starstreak, targeting Russian vehicles on the ground, quite possibly quite often. And again, it will probably be known as a more effective anti-ground vehicle than an actual more of an effective air defense vehicle, because or not vehicle but platform, because again with the Starstreak you have to keep your reticle on the target, and again it can be difficult to track a fast-moving helicopter or a low-flying jet at great speed versus tracking a slower-moving and or stationary vehicle on the ground. So again, the Starstreak in all likelihood can be a more effective weapon system to engage ground targets than actual going after air targets. Other systems that we believe quite possibly we are seeing being delivered to Ukraine, I believe at some point, again, as I talked about in earlier episodes, if it has not already been delivered, is the HIMARS system, and quite possibly ATACMS as well, which is the ballistic missile that can be fired out of the HIMARS system. And not only that, obviously can fire the smaller rockets out of the HIMARS with extended ranges as well. And it sounds like the British quite possibly have already delivered said systems, or in the process of contemplating the delivery of those systems to the Ukrainian military. So again, we're seeing a wide range of equipment being moved into Ukraine by these Western nations. Again, the Starstreak, the Javelin, the Inlaw, the Panzerfaust III, and a host of supplies. And that's really the big thing in terms of what is really helping the Ukrainians resist this Russian military operation. And that is both the sheer amount of supplies that are crossing in from Poland, Romania, and what have you, but also, again, the intelligence aspect that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the United States, are supplying to Ukrainian forces. I wanted to get back up over to the Kiev area of operations, and again, this becomes a continued, very, very much so precarious operation for the Russian military. It would appear that, again, the Ukrainians continue to have success northwest of Kiev as these Russian forces continue to withdraw from this area. And if we think back to the early stages of this operation, in which we saw the Russians conduct this special operation or towards the Hostomel air base, it was a operation that eventually cost the Russians greatly, both in terms of manpower, materiel, and not just the operations near Hostomel, but the operations that continued on near Bucha and other areas just to the northwest of Kiev, and it was done with great expense. Now I understand the Russian thought process is that this was necessary to draw Ukrainian forces from other areas of operations to focus on preventing the fall of Kiev and a sustained Russian drive into Kiev. And again, from the Russian view, is that this part of the operation was successful, as the Ukrainians had were very well dug in, obviously along the line of contact in the areas near Donetsk, Luhansk, obviously Mariupol, and more importantly, by drawing these Ukrainian forces to defend areas north and northwest of Kiev, it prevented the Ukrainians from reinforcing areas such as Mariupol, Kherson, and some of these other areas. But look, at the end of the day, you can say that, but unfortunately for the Russians, the objective was when they moved into northern Ukraine, specifically the western portions of the Dnieper River on the western side of the Dnieper River, the goal was to eventually encircle Kiev. And the battles that took place near Antonov airfield cost the Russians greatly. And not only that, we know that there were other special operations that the Russians attempted to air bases to the southwest as well. And those operations did not go well. As we talked about before, they were high-risk, high-reward operations where if we did see the Russians conduct a successful operations, it would have put the Ukrainians quite possibly in a very precarious situation. But unfortunately for the Russians, and fortunately for the Ukrainians were able to fend off a lot of these operations and apply enough pressure to the continued Russian force construct that was deployed northwest of Kiev and even to the northeast of Kiev, that eventually the Russian General Staff has decided to, for all intents and purposes, they appear to be withdrawing again from these areas and calling off some of these large-scale operations that were focused on threatening Kiev. Again, in hindsight, there's not a lot that you can do. Obviously, the operations have already taken place, but again, I think as we go forward into history and as this becomes history, that military strategists will look back on this as an operation that the Russians probably should have thought out better. And again, it appears the way Russian forces were quickly deployed into Belarus, and the operational plan was put into effect to make a move into northern Ukraine. Again, the Russians probably had about a month of preparation time for its forces to move into to Belarus and get ready for set operations both near Chernihiv and northwest of Kiev. Again, initially they had some success. They were able to seize Chernobyl, but as they got down towards Ivan-Kiev and Bucha and Irpin and other areas just to the north of Kiev, they really ran into some tenacious resistance, and they weren't really able to proceed any further. And probably a fairly wise decision at this point to redeploy those forces into other areas of the theater of operations where they may have more success going forward. And I think for the Russians to call this a successful operation, I believe at least at some point they're going to have to secure large chunks of the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, to include eventually taking hold of securing Kharkiv. The Russians are not there yet, and it's going to be very, very difficult to conduct that operation successfully and take control of these areas. But I think the Russians are, in order to articulate a successful operation, they're going to have to seize control of all territory east of the Dnieper River. I understand that, again, from the Russian side, what we're hearing from the Russian MOD, Ministry of Defense, in terms of phase one of the operation, they deem it successful because they feel like they have destroyed, one, the Ukrainian Navy, which really didn't exist. Two, they feel like they have destroyed the Ukrainian Air Force. And three, they've greatly degraded Ukrainian force capacity, both industrial and Ukrainian military capabilities in terms of their maneuver brigades and maneuver battalions. But again, if the Russians aren't able to seize, again, the eastern side of the Dnieper River, the Ukrainians are going to rebuild. And 2 years from now, the Russians could be facing a much stronger Ukrainian force if the North Atlantic Treaty Organization of Western nations and the United States help rebuild the Ukrainian Air Force. So again, hypothetically, if we move 2 years into the future, and let's say the Russians control an area that may look somewhat like they control now, it's going to be a precarious situation for the Russians because, again, we maybe see the Ukrainians flying F-16s 2 years from now. We may see a lot of Western tanks being deployed inside of Ukraine, meaning the Ukrainians start using Western armored vehicles and start to replenish those stocks of anti-tank guided weapon systems, start maybe producing or starting to at least deploy in mass a lot more Western equipment. And if that's the case 2 years from now, where we could, in theory, see a stronger Ukrainian military than what even exists now, then what was the purpose of the operation? I understand that the Russians can say now that they've degraded the Ukrainian military, and they could call that a success. But ultimately, again, if we fast forward into the future, and the Ukrainian military is much powerful because of the result of this conflict, and its required need to rearm itself with a lot of Western equipment, then again, I think the Russians really have to reanalyze what it was trying to do, and if in fact it accomplished anything. So again, that's why it's going to be it's going to be of the Russian imperative to seize control of all this terrain east of the Dnieper River. That way the Russians can say, hey, we have a major terrain feature now, the Dnieper River, in which we can defend eastern Ukraine and Russia proper from threats going forward into the long-term future. And what I mean by that is 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. Imagine if let's say the Germans during World War II, during the late 30s, early 40s, had the ability to start its operations inside of Ukraine. And again, this is just the Russian perspective, but this is what the Russians see, that eventually they could see some sort of hostile force in Ukraine conducting offensive operations against Russia proper. That is the Russian fear, and that is why, again, they're looking kind of to do what they're trying to do, especially in terms right now of seizing the eastern part of Ukraine. And again, I think that is really going to be the only success that can be weighed for the Russians if, in fact, they continue to prosecute the war and are able to seize control of this landmass east of the Dnieper River. Anything less than that, again, I think as we go 2 years forward, the way the Ukrainians are probably going to rearm is again going to put the Russians in a very precarious situation if we don't see the Russians accomplish some of these objectives that they were looking to accomplish. So again, the Russians are articulating they're going into this phase two, and that would appear to be at least a continued war of attrition and maneuver war with the intent of seizing control of the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. But again, we're going to continue to monitor the situation, and obviously we'll have more content very, very soon. Thanks for joining us again. Have a good day.